Hi, this is Sasha Segan from PCMag.com here at Mobile World Congress with Neville Ray, the CTO of T-Mobile, here just as they've announced that they are going to be rolling out 5G in 30 cities. When exactly?
Well, we're going to start the build in 2018. So by the end of this year, those 30 cities will be well underway.
So they'll be well underway, but what devices are you going to be able to use this 5G on? Because I know that AT&T has said, oh, we're going to do 5G in a couple of cities. We're going to have this puck, right?
Yeah. So I think that's the big debate in the industry, right, on devices and you know, where will we be in 2018? So you have a fixed solution from Verizon, which we find very unexciting at this point in time, with very limited reach, and AT&T's puck that you mentioned. So we're focused on smartphones, which is what consumers really care about, and those smartphones that will work on both 600 megahertz and millimeter wave bands will come in the first half of 19.
Okay, so one of my other questions was going to be about millimeter wave, because you've talked a lot about doing 5G in this low 600 band, but that doesn't get the kind of speeds that everyone is talking about with 5G, right?
Right. So I think you have to think about 5G working across all spectrum bands. And one of the big discussions in 5G is this, you know, incredible IoT space that's going to open up. And clearly that's going to need low band spectrum, you know, the geography and size and mass and scale of the US. For connectivity options that work everywhere, you need low band spectrum. So we want to make sure that whole use case opens up on IoT. And of course, broad mobility using 600 megahertz spectrum. But when you get into these deep, you know, urban areas in core metro America, that's where we want to start using our millimeter wave spectrum. And we have material millimeter wave spectrum assets. So part of our news is announcing we've been very vocal about our plans to build out nationwide 5G on the 600 megahertz layer by 2020. And that's well underway. We're already deploying, you know, 5G capable equipment now in 2018.
Now, are all of your 600 megahertz cell sites, are those all basically software upgradable to 5G?
That's effectively the story.
Okay.
There's a small number where we were deploying equipment very early on in 600 megahertz for LTE that's not 5G ready, but the vast mass of everything that we do and have done is 5G capable.
And you have that in more than 700 cities and towns.
700 cities. We broke that news last week, so we're moving at a tremendous pace. There's well over a third of the geography in the US to run at in 2018. Almost half, actually, the geography of the US. So we're moving very, very quickly on 600 megahertz deployment. But we've not said much about millimeter wave. And so we will start launching and building our millimeter wave assets in 18, launching in the first part of 19. So big cities. We're not going to be doing stuff in Waco. We're going to be in LA, in New York, in Vegas, Dallas. And so they're the cities we're talking about now. There'll be more. But we're going to make a really aggressive start in 18 with millimeter wave as well as the 600. Is
that where you get those multi-gigabit speeds that people are talking about with 5G? Are those real? Are those what users are really going to get?
I think it's going to be, we'll have to see. I mean, the hope with millimeter wave is that because there's so much spectrum available in the can't even say it, millimeter wave bands, that you will be able to get the multi-gigabit speeds. You need a lot of spectrum way outside of what's available in low or mid-band today in the US to get those multi-gigabit speeds. It's just the physics. And so we have a lot of millimeter wave in some key markets. We want to go and really start our network, see how the networks perform. How is mobility on millimeter wave? Can we really secure the mobility and those high speeds? And that work is going to start in earnest now. And we're confident we'll have millimeter wave ready to go live for customers in the first part of 19.
Now, in the meantime, also, we're talking about high-band spectrum, and that makes me think about LAA, which is putting LTE over essentially Wi-Fi airwaves.
5 gig, we want. It's not that. It's not Wi-Fi alone.
Wi-Fi-esque, exactly. Sharing politely with Wi-Fi.
Very well.
But in terms of sharing politely with Wi-Fi, I've heard that you've been having some trouble with interference from big public Wi-Fi developments like Link NYC. How is that going? Is that a problem?
Yeah, I mean, we're early on in our LAA deployments. I'm actually not aware of any major issues on 5 gigahertz. I mean, especially in the outdoor area, which is what we're talking about. We're deploying LAA on our small cells, so it's outdoor deployment. We're finding great success in actually, one, nobody on the spectrum, and two, the performance of the spectrum. We've seen average speeds in an area in New York maybe go from 100 MIPS to 600 MIPS, leveraging LAA. So it's actually very exciting. And I think this is the whole story on, the early rollouts of 5G. I mean, we've talked many times, Sasha, we're pushing really hard on the LTE story, all the feature sets and capabilities that we put into the network, and now starting to fully be realized, like the Galaxy device that launched yesterday, a 1.2 gig capable phone packed full of features. That's exciting stuff, and that's going to rock on our LTE network. We love to say fastest phone on the fastest network, and we'll see that through speed test and Ookla. So.
Yeah, I mean, but I want to ask about that too, right. Because that those peak speed numbers always go out there in the marketing,
right.
And you and I know no one is really going to get 1.2 gigs. So
not very often. It will happen.
You think it'll happen? Yeah. It'll happen.
Yeah. So I mean, we breached a gig in licensed spectrum in December down in Augusta. And that was a first. We didn't make a lot of noise about it, but that was an actual gig speed. And so the theoretical maximums are there, and in the perfect radio conditions, they can be realized. But you're right, average speeds are going to be a long, long way from gigabit type speeds in LTE.
But so realistically, if people are upgrading, say, from a Galaxy S8 to a Galaxy S9, yes. What sort of a difference in the experience on the T-Mobile network would they get?
Well, they're certainly going to see faster speeds. I mean, the device is feature-rich. It doesn't just help the folks on an S9. I mean, the speed and performance on those devices on the network, all kind of ships rise on that tide, right? The networks become more efficient as more and more devices are using those features and capabilities. But the other piece that we want to make sure folks understand is you do all of that work in LTE and LTE Advanced, and then the 5G story comes on top, and you use both technology layers together. So if you think about what we do today, you live in LTE or you live in 3G. You don't live in 3G very much on our network, as your reporting shows. I mean, 80% of our calls now, let alone our data, are on our LTE layer. 97% of our data is on the LTE layer. But if you come off the LTE layer, you're in 3G or you're in 2G.
Right, there's a sharp cliff.
There's a sharp cliff.
Yeah.
Now, the beauty with 5G is you can leverage all of that goodness of the LTE layer, and whatever you can do on 5G will come on top and be combined. And so everybody, as we start to launch 5G services, even if the spectrum volumes are thin, you will see better performance on a 5G device because it's going to leverage the LTE base and then couple with the 5G performance and capability.
And I want to dig a little more into what better performance means in that narrowband 5G context. Right. If you have 5G on 20 megahertz of spectrum, how is that experience different from 4G on 20 megahertz of spectrum?
Well, what you'll do is you add the 4G to the 5G. So that's the beauty of it. It's incremental capability and benefit. It's not a trade-off. It's not binary. You're on 4G or 5G. You'll be on both. So every time we add even a thin layer of spectrum, you're adding more capacity, more performance, more capability with 5G. Now, 5G radio for radio, in those small bandwidths, is still going to be probably, we don't know fully yet, but about 20–25% more spectrally efficient. So you can have more capacity, more speeds on like-for-like spectrum volumes. But the beauty with the 5G rollouts is you'll put the two spectrum sources together effectively and leverage that combined benefit across the spectrum. And we've never been able to do that. Couldn't do that between 3G and 4G. You had to pick one or the other. So even if you think about the story on LTE performance and efficiency over the last 3–4 years, and the capabilities and speeds, and we've been driving speeds north, right? Even though usage has gone through the roof, so speeds have been getting better. LTE Advanced will continue that path with LAA. FD MIMO will happen in LTE, in mid-band spectrum for us this year. That's another really spectrum efficiency enhancing feature and capability. So the LTE story continues to improve, and then the 5G starts on top. Now, if you have millimeter wave assets and maybe it's a small area off of a small cell or whatever else, those speeds may go through the roof. But even with the low band assets, you will see incremental performance and speed with those early 5G rollouts.
Now, I feel like a lot of when we're talking about some of the advantages of narrowband 5G, we can talk a lot about IoT and a lot about enterprise and a lot about smart cities, and those aren't areas where T-Mobile currently has a lot of customers. Those are areas where a lot of those enterprises and municipalities are very entrenched with AT&T and Verizon.
Somewhat, yeah.
So What do you say to them? What do you say to a city or a shipping company which has a huge contract with one of those other providers to try to bring them over to your network?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of that position is embedded in the past history of our network, right? And you've reported many times the improvement in the scale of the network we now have in LTE. So where 5 years ago we didn't have any LTE, it was really hard to get past, hello with a national provider because our network wasn't broad enough. Now today we're right there. And so the decision making and the framework for that is changing with many of those companies. And what we want to do with why we're pushing so hard on low band, one, we were very successful in the auction. But two, we really want to open up that 5G highway for IoT. And it's not just, you think about the big business aspects and maybe agricultural stuff. I want to make sure that people, the phrase often overused is everything that can be connected will be connected. Right. But think about maybe a 5G sensor that you could embed in a child's jacket, for example. You're going to want to make sure that thing becomes disposable because the battery life is longer than the life of the garment. But one thing you need is constant connectivity. You can't afford for that thing to fall out of a millimeter wave, bubble of coverage somewhere. You need broad coverage and connectivity for those services to work. So think about consumer IoT as well as business IoT, and that's a space where we think we can really lead and we can drive some real innovation there. The business side, conversations changed. We're having actually a lot of success in the traditional marketplace. So pushing hard on 5G and being the first company to build out and commit. Nobody else is committing to building out a nationwide 5G network. So think about the opportunities we can create. We've been very disruptive on the consumer side, and we intend to be fully disruptive on the business side too as we go forward here. And there's 1,001 IoT use cases. Most of them depend on broad coverage and connectivity, and not high throughput. Now some do, but the vast majority do not. And so think very long-lived, high battery life, billions of connected sensors, those types of products. There's a world of possibilities there, and you have to do that in low band.
Now, going back to consumer uses. Are you tying at all your quick and early and comprehensive launch of 5G in with T-Mobile's development as a television provider?
Somewhat. I mean, we're super excited about what's going to happen with Layer 3. But it's early days. We've not really made any product announcements. I don't have any to give you today.
I was just trying to slip that in there.
But clearly, I mean, we see the TV consumption space as something that is ripe for disruption. And there's massive disruption already. But you've heard John and Mike and other folks in the company talk about our plans to be disruptive in that space, but more to come.
Okay, so just finishing up. So we're hearing all of this about all of these big network changes that are coming. Should people be worried at all about the phones that they're buying now? Should they be holding off for the next generation of modems because they'll take advantage of something that if they buy something now, they'll think, oh, I'm going to miss out? What do you say to people who are thinking of buying devices now, but they hear about all these technologies that are coming? Yeah,
it's always, I mean, it's the technology dilemma in everything you buy, right?
Yeah.
If it's the laptop or the, the smartphone or the tablet or whatever the, consumer electronics item may be. I mean, there's some really exciting devices coming this year, and the Samsung device announced yesterday. That's a super exciting piece of hardware, and it's going to rock on our network. So
you're going to have another 15, another dozen Band 71 devices before the end of the year, right?
That's right. I mean, we're trying to make sure, and the story, I can never say everything will be, Band 71 capable, but we're pushing very hard for that, and we've got a lot of confidence. But we've said a dozen or more smartphones this year will be Band 71 capable. Tremendous story, and we want folks to really look at, moving across to a 600 megahertz spectrum capable phone, because that will give them without doubt the best experience on T-Mobile. The 5G stuff is going to start arriving next year, but it's going to be early. And the benefits in that 5G space will be limited for a period of time. I mean, I think it will start to come alive in 19. We've always said it's kind of that 2020 timeframe when things start to really potentially shift and change. But there's a lot of work to be done on, and many of the OEMs are not ready for a 5G story yet. So it's going to take some time. So if I'm a consumer today and I'm looking at a great product like came out yesterday, I know what I do. I go buy it.
Okay, great.
I wouldn't hesitate. So those phones are exciting for the banding and the speed, performance, and capability that come with them.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming over here, Neville. It's always great talking to you.
Delighted to do it. First time we've done this on video.
Yeah, I know, and we've been talking for so many years.
It's a lot of fun.
Thank you all for watching. This has been PCMag at Mobile World Congress with Neville Ray, the CTO of T-Mobile. And we will continue to have great videos and great interviews throughout the show.